Sin Fronteras Western New York, Buffalo's media platform for Western New York Hispanics,
producing bicultural content that informs, entertains, and inspires the forward thinking.
Sin Fronteras Western New York, delivering bilingual stories,
hot topic conversations,
and the voices from our Latino community.
Sin Fronteras Western New York,
la única producción contemporánea en español
y en inglés en la ciudad de Buffalo. Sin Fronteras Western New York,
your connection to cultural ties in Latin America
and hyperlocal news in the Western New York area.
Sin Fronteras Western New York es para ti.
Hola amigos y muy buenos días o buenas tardes. I don't know when you're listening to this, so I gotta cover all my bases. But you are listening to Sin Fronteras Western New York here on Radio Bilingüe. I am Lorenzo Rodriguez and welcome yet again to another episode. And if you're new to this, thank you for joining us. If you've been listening since the beginning or last episode or 2 episodes ago, thank you so much. Either way, you could be anywhere in the world, but you're listening to us right now. So thank you. And yet again, I'm holding it down solo. Just me this time. Well, for a little bit. We will get to our interview of the week. We're going to have a great interview with Julie Palmer, the CEO of PATH, People Against Trafficking Humans. We're gonna have a very in-depth conversation about everything going on with that in our world. But in the meantime, we kick things off here on Sin Fronteras, Western New York, with a little bit of news. As we call it, las noticias que nos importa. First off, we start with the latest from Venezuela, where we continue to cover the political tensions that are rising following the disputed presidential election that took place in late July. Opposition leader and presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez has recently fled to Spain, seeking asylum amid accusations of election fraud from President Nicolás Maduro's government. The National Electoral Council declared Maduro the winner with 51% of the vote, but Gonzalez and the opposition claims that the election was rigged, showing Gonzalez won with 73% of the votes. Protests have erupted, resulting in over 24 deaths and thousands of arrests, while 6 opposition leaders seek refuge in the Argentinian embassy in the capital city of Caracas. Regionally, you have Chile, Brazil, and Colombia that have pressured Maduro to release detained election results, while Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia all support Maduro's election win. The U.S. and EU reject the outcome, recognizing Gonzalez as the legitimate winner. In related news, the U.S. seized the luxury jet that's been used by Maduro, alleging it was illegally purchased to bypass sanctions placed on the country. This follows other U.S. actions that have targeted assets linked to Maduro's government and a $15 million bounty for his arrest on drug trafficking charges. International responses to Venezuela's election are mixed. The U.S., Germany, and Japan have all called for more scrutiny, while Russia, China, Iran, and several other Latin American nations have recognized Maduro's victory. The EU has called for clarity in the voting process, with some countries like Canada withholding recognition of the election results. As always, we'll continue to monitor this situation as it develops. In immigration news, the migration crisis in Latin America continues to escalate, particularly in Panama, where there is a major crackdown underway. Panama, under the leadership of its new president, José Raúl Mulino, is intensifying efforts to control migration through the treacherous Darien Gap, a key route for migrants headed northward up to North America. This path, known for its dangerous jungle terrain, has seen more than 500,000 people crossing in the last year alone, most of them Venezuelans fleeing political turmoil and economic hardship. Recently, Panama deported 29 Colombian nationals on its first U.S.-funded flight, part of a new agreement signed with the United States in late July. This agreement aims to reduce irregular migration and includes U.S. support with equipment, transportation, and logistics for the deportation process. Panama's immigration authorities have also deported over 100 Indian nationals, with plans to expand the repatriations to other groups such as Chinese and Ecuadorian migrants. However, Panama's ability to deport Venezuelans has been hampered by its strained diplomatic relations with Caracas, as mentioned prior, following its refusal to recognize Maduro's contested election win. As a result, Panama has suspended diplomatic ties with Venezuela, further complicating the deportation process. President Mulino has emphasized that stopping the flow of migrants through Panama is a priority for his administration, a stance supported by Washington, which has pledged $6 million in funding for repatriation efforts. These deportations appear to be making an impact, though, with reports of a 30% decrease in migration through the Darien Gap this year. Still, many believe that this drop may be temporary. Analysts warn that it could result from a wait-and-see approach by migrants and smugglers, who are pausing to assess the new policy's impact. The stakes remain high as Panama continues to navigate its role in the broader migration crisis, a crisis fueled in part by ongoing political unrest in Venezuela. We will continue to monitor this immigration news, as well as everything going on in Venezuela, in Caracas, and Central and South America. But we move on with that into our conversation of the week. And fittingly enough, it is Casimiro Rodriguez and I speaking with Julie Palmer. Julie is a wife, a mother of four, a Western New York native, but most importantly, she felt a calling over a decade ago to shift from her former career in behavioral mental health to funding PATH. And through her leadership, the organization has served over hundreds of survivors, offering services from therapy, medical care, meals, transportation, housing, and just a haven of support to victims of human trafficking. Casimiro and I sat down with Julie. Hopefully you enjoy this very insightful and informative conversation. All right, and welcome to Sin Fronteras Western New York's. This is our interview portion of the show. We got our open. We talk about our news of the day, news of the week, and this news that this guest that we're about to speak to is this topic has been in the news for quite some time. Unfortunately, it's one that I think as a nation we sometimes don't bring up to the forefront enough. You hear it be mentioned in different communities, and especially when we talk about immigration and the border and the amount of people coming through the southern border and northern border of the United States, all our borders. This is also tied to it, whether it's used for political points, to score political points, it's mentioned, but it's a very serious and very important conversation we're about to have here. One that also is a bit heavy. So a bit of a forewarning for our listeners. We're going to be dealing with the subject of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and everything therein. So with that said, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Julie Palmer. Julie is the Executive Director of PATH Incorporated, and PATH stands for People Against Trafficking Humans. You're also the founder of PATH's Enrichment Center. We're going to get to all of that in just a bit, but I feel like we got to give a bit of your bona fides first and foremost, because you, as the founder, you've had over 25 years of experience in not only in human trafficking but also mental health, another big component in the conversations in our society right now. But you decided to take that knowledge and apply it to the just hopefully ending human trafficking, and through educating folks, through raising awareness, through prevention. You have a master's degree from the University of Buffalo in counseling and educational psychology, and you have a bachelor's in music therapy. We might ask you something on that to give us a breather towards the end. But you got the TED Talk achievement. You've been featured in a TEDx Buffalo conversation, a talk on human trafficking, and you were honored with the National True Inspiration Award by Chick-fil-A in 2023. A lot there, Julie. Welcome to Sin Fronteras Western New York.
Well, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
We're also joined by one of my co-hosts, one of my colleagues, Casimiro Rodriguez.
Good day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us, Cas.
Sure.
Welcome, Julie.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you guys.
So, as I mentioned, Julie, topic of human trafficking. I guess we got to start with the core of what constitutes human trafficking, because for a lot of people that's a nebulous topic. What does it entail for the person who's hearing it but doesn't know all the ins and outs around it?
Sure, that's an important question. Human trafficking, actually, there's legislation in our nation called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. And the purpose of that act was to better and broaden define the topic, the issue, and also better serve victims and prosecute perpetrators. So when we look at the legal definition of human trafficking, it's the recruiting, harboring, or transporting a person solely for the purpose of either commercial sex or forced labor. And in order for the law to see it as a crime, there needs to be force, fraud, or coercion. Now, if there's a child involved, 18 or under, they do not have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. So what does that all mean? When we recruit an individual, it can just mean locally in our community. Somebody can be recruited through multiple means, devices, internet, community. Somebody may be involved in different activity and recruited. And then it can be transported. Just means they're taking to locations to be exploited. It doesn't have to go across the nation. It can. Some of the people we serve are brought in and out of different cities and areas, and some it's just local in the community. And then when we look at harboring, again, it's just sometimes manipulative hold somebody has on an individual that engages them in their vulnerability to keep them involved. And so when we look at force, fraud, or coercion, it can be acts of violence or threat of violence. We've had clients tell us, we've had minors who said that their younger siblings were threatened and that's why they did what they did. We've had people beaten, stabbed, all sorts of things have happened to keep them engaged. Fraud, somebody's promised something, told they're going to have a certain job, a certain opportunity, and then it turns out to be different. And then coercion, I would say we see that a lot. That's looking at people's circumstance and coercing them. Maybe they need shelter, maybe they need food, maybe there's a substance use issue. So it's really taking advantage of a lot of people's circumstances. It's
basically, from what I've gathered, it's modern day slavery.
It is. And the statistics and data that you see around the globe is that there's anywhere from 27 to 40 million people engaged in that, which is double during the African slave trade, the number of people. It is such a hidden crime. I think it's something that looks different also in every nation, even in the region of our nation. And so I think because of that, it is much more difficult to identify and much more difficult to be able to serve those people that are caught up in it.
Very interesting. Julie, you're the executive director of PATH Incorporated, and you're also the founder of PATH Enrichment Center. Where's that center located?
Yeah, our center is in the city of Buffalo on Delaware. And so we're right in the heart of downtown Buffalo, where we're able to serve a wide variety of people. We serve all 8 counties of Western New York. And so we have some people that we're reaching out to suburbs and other communities as well.
Can you share the mission of PATH Incorporated with the audience?
Yeah, so our mission is really trying to end human trafficking through education, prevention, and restoration. So one of the big pieces is the outreach piece. We've really engaged a lot of arena schools. We've done a lot of initiatives in educating the student body. We educate other nonprofit organizations, businesses, other settings. We've had a lot of asks lately for a lot of different organizations to learn more. I think people are becoming more attuned to it, want to better understand what indicators to look out for, how they can access our resources. And then we do prevention measures. So we have maybe the individuals who are victims of crime and assault that we will also help serve to help keep them from being further engaged in exploitation. And then we also serve sex and labor trafficking victims at our center.
You mentioned education. What are some of those educational institutions you're working with? And also, what are the ages? When does this prevention or this education begin?
So for us, we've been really working in a lot of districts, whether it's in the city, in the suburbs, and typically it's been middle and high school level students. We had a few camps this summer we were asked to speak at where it was youth that were middle and high school. We've been asked to speak to various youth programs. We go into high schools and speak into some of the classrooms, various classes that go on the topic. So we've really had a lot of opportunity to grow that. We've had college institutions reaching out now and wanting more education in that sector. So we've really had good opportunity to be able to help people understand it better.
Where is I guess you mentioned it's, and I mentioned off the top as well, it's something that we hear a lot about, but not properly grasp or understand. Where is that disconnect that you're finding with folks? Because I'll be honest, my assumption has always been that it's more so on sexual trafficking, human beings for the use of sexual gratification, but it's more than that. It's for labor. Where is it that you're finding folks are not properly aware of what goes into human trafficking?
I think that's a good question. I mean, we only know what we can see or read, right? So if we watch films, or if maybe we're just looking at social media, we might get certain pictures of it. It might look certain ways, but I think there's a broad context to the issue that our region is seeing in a myriad of ways. The commercial sex industry is the exchange of something for sex act. So, we could see all sorts of things exchanged. Maybe somebody needed a place to stay. Maybe they needed a substance they're engaged in. Maybe somebody's grooming them and dating them. And there's a lot of different ways we're going to access. And then in the labor community, there's a lot more awareness being raised to labor trafficking, a lot more understanding of how we're seeing that play out. And there was some task forces and groups in the region that do those efforts to help better research that and see, we're seeing hospitality industry, construction industry, farm communities, where people are put in situations, again, where there has to be force, fraud, or coercion, right? Because there's violation of labor laws, and then there's force, fraud, or coercion, right? And so maybe it's, threaten that we'll deport you, or we will give you shelter, but if you don't work for us, we're going to take that away. Mechanisms that are used that are an exploitative means.
I feel a lot of bait and switching is promise of salary or benefits, and then
sure, and then there could be fraud engagement. There could be misleading of individuals. Sometimes they can be brought into a region expecting they're going to have a certain type of work. I mean, there has been recently some exposure to the massage parlor community and how some people were brought into work there and thought they were doing massages, but then they were asked to do other things. And so, again, that's where it becomes something hidden. Right? People don't really understand what was happening in the back room and what's going on behind closed doors, or how people are being sold on the internet. We have many clients who tell us their pictures were posted on all these nefarious sites, and half the time they don't even know. Half the time they may be, somebody may put, lace something and they're not even aware of some of the things happening to them. So it really is, unfortunately, a crime that generates a lot of revenue, right? It's generating about $150 billion per year.
Goodness.
And so if you're criminal mindset and you're looking, right, most crime is motivated by money and power. Mm-hmm. And so in general, this unfortunately allows for money and power.
And I mentioned at the borders, but you also brought up that it's interstate as well.
It can be right in our community. We have a lot of domestic trafficking victims. I think that, it's looking at both, right? Of course, we're a refugee resettlement community. We have migrants that have been brought in the community, but we also have, residents right in Western New York who are being impacted as well. I would say perpetrators really, they'll select anybody who's vulnerable. They're not necessarily regarding your status or, what you affiliate. They're more trying to discover who they can exploit.
So it touches all populations.
It touches every population. We do a lot of demographic spread and looking at the people we serve, and it is touching all populations.
Do you have high numbers in certain populations, or it's pretty much across the board?
It's very widespread, surprisingly. It's a very balanced spread of different demographics that are being affected by this crime.
Julie, how has PATH grown under your leadership in establishing this enrichment center?
Well, I want to attribute that to the community, the donors, the foundations, the grant support, and the amazing team I have that does the work and the boots on the ground. I've been really fortunate and blessed to have a lot of support in the region. We started off renting a 500 square foot room. I started in 2012 and did a lot of education, understanding of the topic myself. And then we got incorporated and filed our 501c3 and started our services in 2015. So we are actually entering our 10th year this September. And I've really learned a lot from the people we serve, from the work itself, and just have been able to grow from that first space to we have a donor 4 years ago that bought us the building we're in. So we are in there rent-free. It's a beautiful space. Grown our team. We have, a dozen staff positions and 35 volunteers. So, having over 50 people engaged in the work with us, been able to develop partnerships in the community. We have well health. We have physicians doing free health care right on site. We've just had a lot of support, and it's just been really encouraging to see how much this community cares, whether they're volunteering, whether they're contributing, whether they're on staff. And so I really just attribute that to the care of Western New York.
With your extensive background in mental health, which is, broad, how do you integrate trauma-informed care into the services provided at your enrichment center?
Yeah, that's a really important thing to have when you're working with trauma victims. And, I joke with my staff, because I am aging, that when I got my master's at UB, there was no such thing as trauma-informed care. Didn't exist. And so I was really fortunate when I did
It was 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was only 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's not that long ago.
Yeah. Thanks for that. But no. So, I was fortunate when I got started with PATH. The University of Buffalo started their Trauma-Informed Care Institute and reached out to organization leaders and said, hey, we're doing this program. They got a health fellow grant and reached out to us and said, hey, we've got some foundation grant if you'd like to do this. And I thought, well, wow, what a great opportunity. So it was a 7-month program. It was pretty intense, and it was excellent. I really learned a lot. Post-masters, it was a really great program to kind of glean from and see more current practices. And I think, there's kind of real important key components of trauma-informed care, one being your environment. How does your environment affect triggering trauma? And, I will joke with my staff about, there's, I like work of excellence, or some call it OCD, whatever you want to say. But I think that our space feeling warm and welcoming and organized and clean is really important to somebody who comes in from a space of trauma and anxiety. So I think, safety of your environment. We have a locked door system. People have to buzz in, keeping our property and grounds safe and lit, just the things we may not really consider. That environment is key. How do we engage ourselves in our environment with our clients? How do we engage our safety measures with our clients? How do we relate with them? How do we let them know that they are empowered? A lot of strength-based empowerment, choice making. And sometimes people are in situations where they are seeking a lot of direction. Sometimes they want that, and sometimes they want to be empowered for those decisions. So it's really meeting people where they're at and in understanding that. One of the things that we've really learned and developed was, and I was actually recently on a webinar about strengths-based assessing, because sometimes we can get caught up in checking boxes of indicators, but then what are we asking of those we serve as far as their strengths and things they already have accomplished? We can lose sight in that, and that's just part of the industry, right? I've been doing behavioral mental health a really long time. We have a lot of indicator boxes we're supposed to check, right? But I think that's one thing we've really learned and adapted over the years is it's really key for the people that we serve to understand they already have innate strength. There is already capacity within them. And so if we can identify that early on, that's what we can start focusing on more and more. And it's important to understand how they've been traumatized, what that looks like. But I think it's also important to access and help people see their strengths. That's
great, considering what I gotta imagine is it's the people, and I use that loosely, that prey on these individuals that get taken as victims, exploit whether it be their socioeconomic status, their living situation, a substance use issue. I got to imagine these are all easy entry points for these nefarious individuals to take advantage of individuals, for Path to provide them the opposite of that, a clean environment, a positive environment, reminding them also, because I got to imagine also that these individuals just break them down mentally to a point where they are mental prisoners. So reminding folks of the power within that everyone has, and the knowledge that they might not have. Like, that's, at the end of the day, I think a lot of people get taken advantage in general because they just don't know enough. They're not aware of. We're a show that focuses on the Hispanic community of Western New York and beyond. We try to hopefully educate our demographic, our population, but the people that we're speaking about here are some of those same individuals that are coming from other countries, don't know what's available to them, don't know minimum wage, don't know that there are public services available to them, and are much more susceptible to these evils. So I applaud you for what you're doing and your group, because we hear about it. Again, we this is something we're in election season. As we talk about everything that's going on immigration-wise, that gets lumped in there. And whether good or bad, mostly just scoring political points, but it's something that I feel like the general populace doesn't see it. As you mentioned, it's an invisible or not as visible threat. The thing that living now in Western New York now for a handful of years, the indigenous population and Red Shirt Day, that was something that was not known to me. And that I got to imagine goes hand in hand. These are missing indigenous women, but they go missing a lot of times because they get taken in for human trafficking. Am I is that one of the groups that you're seeing being exploited?
Again, I'd say it crosses all groups. The Hispanic community is affected. We do have clients in that community. So the indigenous community, I mean, it's really, there's no group it's not affecting. And so I think that's what's really key. I think sometimes too, for example, we've been getting tips and calls on things happening in suburban neighborhoods getting investigated. And now people are boldly doing things right out of a home in the suburbs, right in a neighborhood. And so I think it's just something where it's pervasive. And the good news, I say, you started off by saying it's a heavy topic, but I think there's good news too. And the good news is we can all do something. The good news is, crime isn't going to leave, right? There's always going to be, that's human nature, society. So, but there is good people. And there are things that we can do as a community, whether you have us come speak at your group, whether you're your business or your organization or your faith community or your school, or you volunteer and get involved that way. Come on staff. We're always adding staff and growing. Or you don't have time, but you can give resources. There's just so many ways I feel like we can encourage the community. Yeah, it's happening around us. This is concerning. Be vigilant. Be aware. And if you have our training, we teach you what to look out for, how you can be more aware in your community, how you can look for that to make calls. All those things empower us. And so I think that's an important piece that people can feel empowered to. And that's something we like to really also stress.
Julie, what are the most significant challenges you have faced in raising awareness in the communities about human trafficking?
Yeah, I think you guys did a good job of touching on that. I think some of it is just people don't think it's happening, right? So sometimes there's a little pushback. Well, why do I need that training? It's not happening here. I've heard that a lot. I will say that's changing. That tone is changing a bit. Even 4 years before pre-COVID, going to a school district and saying this is a topic, it was like, no way. That's we don't need to talk about that here. We don't want to alarm parents. I got a lot of that, especially in the suburban communities. And I said, if every kid in your building has a device, which I'm going to guess 99% do, it's happening. They're being solicited. It's just a reality. Post-COVID, that changed a lot because everybody went remote. Kids were handing Chromebooks. We didn't know what to put parameters on. I think it's a lot. It significantly has improved. With my own kids, they tell me like it's so locked down. They even locked down my memory, and I got to delete stuff. So we've learned a lot, right? And that's part of anything in society. We learn and develop and grow. So now there's a lot of ask, where we get a lot more requests with schools and youth because the realization is a lot of these recruitment is happening right on social media, on internet platforms, gaming systems. I was doing a training with the FBI, and they were talking about Discord and how easily accessible kids are on that because of the chat. Yep. Any random person can chat with your child. They can convince them anything, get them to send them something. They're getting, kids to send, explicit photos and then blackmailing, say, send me $200 or we're posting it. I mean, all sorts of things. And it's so fast and easy. And so I think it's just something that we can just be empowered to understand, something simple that we, even my own kids in my house and when we tell youth is when you load an app, most of them are automatically public in their settings. Simple thing to do is go in and put everything private. It's one simple thing that takes us a few minutes and we've protected ourselves in a significant way. So it's just some of those tips that we can give people to better understand.
As far as we mentioned education and understanding just how pervasive this evil is, but also how prevalent. What can we do besides educating ourselves on how to look for it? What else can we do? You mentioned the just social media. Is it fighting for regulation? Is it? I don't know. I ask you right now. What's the best way that I can start fighting and combating human trafficking and where I'm at here in Western New York?
Yeah. I mean, those are great questions. I think a lot of it depends where your sphere of influence is. You mentioned legislation. I think that people that are lobbying, people in positions of government, it's important for this to be a topic where we are strengthening laws, where we are looking at protective measures. I think that needs to continue to develop. How do we prosecute? What constitutes the level of crime trafficking is? What are the charges? I think some of those things. I think it's also just in your own community, being more aware, I'd say, more engaged. I talk to people that work in schools or with youth or your own children. Just be engaged, honestly. Know what they're doing. Know who they're talking to. I mean, my kids, you could feel sorry for them because I know way too much. But I'm that mom that we have a lot of control over their devices.
You have to be.
And all the way through till they graduated high school. I'm like, if I'm paying your phone, I have control. You want to buy your own phone? Roof. Then you do you, So I'm still with my 16-year-old going, hey, what do you do on your phone? What are you looking at? I walk by, my 18-year-old, what's going on? And I think part of it's just being engaged. Yeah. Kids isolate if they're disengaged, noticing that. Are they disengaging? Are they so into a device that they can't even engage socially otherwise? There's just things you can look. When you're in your own community, you're going to a restaurant, nail salon, hair salon, just what are you noticing? Paying attention to what's happening in our community, volunteering with our organization, contributing, getting involved in other ways, bringing speakers. I think those are all ways people can feel proactive.
And I guess we're jumping all over the place, and I apologize, but there's just so much to grasp here. I guess misconceptions. One that I guess my feeble mind always thought is it's primarily women that are being taken advantage of in this way, but it's not. It's
misconception number one.
You said it's young children and also men and boys, correct?
Yeah, and when I did that training with the FBI and the Discord platform, they said the number one population of growing exploitation was 10 to 17-year-old males.
Goodness.
So yeah, I think that is a huge misconception. I think there's a misconception on, the border kidnapping piece, right? Which is absolutely happening in certain regions. but that doesn't mean that's how it's going to work in every region. So I think, it's like any stereotype we can have, right? Well, if it looks like this over here, it must look like that everywhere, right? And you guys know that yourselves within your own community, right? Within the Hispanic community, there's stereotype. So I think it's just breaking those stereotypes and helping people to understand. Unfortunately, this is extremely widespread, and just really kind of having that mindset of really trying to understand better how that impacts us.
And your experience with TEDx Buffalo, what do you think the impact that talk had on the community?
Yeah. That was just a real honor to get chosen for that. It's a funny story. One of my, I guess if you can still have, your best friend, we've known each other for 35 years since high school. Might have aged myself a little there, but every year she'd bug me since I'd started Path and said, "Oh, you should reach out to TEDx. I think they'd want you." And I'm like, nah. So finally one year, just to like joke with her, I literally went in my room, shut the door, and did my 2-minute thing and sent it. I honestly was just like, I'm just doing it to shut her up. Then she can't ask me anymore. They're not going to pick me. And I get the email, "Congratulations, you've been chosen." And I was like, what?
And now you got to give a whole
And,
speech.
I will say it was really an excellent learning experience. I really enjoyed it. It's actually more intense than you realize. They have a lot of table reads. They do a lot of great teaching on how to do public speaking. They have their own style. The founder of TEDx wrote his book, and they use that style. And at first it was scary to me because they do not allow any mechanism of remembering what you wrote. You have to speak all from memory. And it has to be within, I think it was like 16 minutes. And all you were allowed to have in front of you was a clock that timed you down so that you knew how much time you had. So the challenge of that was great, honestly. I learned a lot about how do you do that? How do you public speak? How do you engage an audience? How do you inflect your tone? I mean, it was really a great experience. I met intelligent, amazing people. And I'm grateful to them because it did expose the issue, and I'll have people regularly say, "I saw your TED Talk," and what a privilege to have something out there the community can use to better understand and raise awareness.
Absolutely. I always equate it to like our modern day Plato's Academy, kind of just the conveyance of ideas and expressing of subjects that are not necessarily mainstream or mainstream enough. Like the subject that we're talking about here. We're speaking with Julie Palmer, just to remind everybody that's tuning in. She's the executive director of PATH Incorporated. PATH stands for People Against Trafficking Humans. And Julie, as far as PATH, you mentioned its history and the journey to get it to where it's at now. How can people get involved? How can folks get more engaged with the mission that you're going after?
Well, we always welcome community engagement. So whether it's, businesses, foundations, community or members, private sector that is interested in giving, we're a nonprofit. And so we do not charge our clients anything for our services. We do not rely on the HMO system. We found that would limit access to care. And that was one barrier we wanted to break in the way we did our organization, is that there's no barrier to care. That was kind of the theme, and it always is the theme. Any program or resource we add is by hearing from those we serve a barrier to care. So no charge, no insurance reimbursement. It's fully funded by the community, by grants, by support. So that's one way to help us continue to grow. We also have open staff positions. People are interested in employment. We utilize volunteerism. And really try to engage. And then we offer speaking opportunities where we train the community. And all of that is on our website. So if you want to volunteer, there's a page to fill out. If you want a speaker, you can request it. If you want to give, there's donation. And that's at pathofwny.org, PATHOFWNY.org. And that's also a site for somebody who needs help. You go on there,
Safe.
immediately at the top of the site is our call and text line that can be reached at any time. Click right on that, call or text us. We have an email on there, a contact page. Somebody's checking it at all times. And that number is 716-601-5678. And that can be somebody in need of help. That can be somebody interested in getting involved. There's always somebody that has that to be able to answer.
So
everything is confidential.
Absolutely. So if we receive contact, whether it's someone in the community concerned, whether it's the person themselves, absolutely. Confidentiality is key. And that's really important to gaining that trust.
Yeah, that was my question, is if we think we've seen something that looks to be human trafficking, go straight to path, go to the authorities, a little bit both.
Yeah, I would say whatever comfort. We are engaged with task forces with law enforcement, and so we know those in the community who are on that, who have that specialized training to address the topic. So we get tips, once in a while, and usually it's the discretion of the person. So we'll get a tip and they'll say, we don't want to be named or indicated. So we just pass on the information. We get some tips where they're open to being called. And so then we pass that along. So we really do it at the discretion of the individual. But if somebody themselves wants help, it's really their discretion and their level of engagement as far as who they want to know and how they want that to be engaged.
Julie, do you find that, the family setting, there's some of that going on within the family setting, or is it always, third party or second party?
Oh, absolutely, unfortunately. It could be partner violence that, they're out having that person. We've heard of like siblings exploiting siblings, or people get in desperate situations, or people start getting addiction issues. There's all sorts of ways. We've had, youth tell us their guardian was involved. So, yeah, unfortunately, again, it's one of those crimes that's affecting across all areas.
It doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a real profile per se. It's like I said, I came in having done my research, but I had my pre-misconceptions of what that entailed. I mean, it has many different appearances, and I'm glad and thrilled that we have an organization like yours helping to really shed more of a light on it. Not enough is being done to, I feel in general, to combat that. We really need to focus in on something that's affecting multiple communities, not just here, but throughout the world.
Right. And that's important, too, that we do, acknowledge that all communities are being affected and that we really try to regard that and really regard everybody's community and what they're experiencing. And one piece that we have been working on for several years is a residential location, because housing is such a need in Western New York. Not alone, separate from human trafficking, just a homeless community, but then, specific to the restoration of human trafficking. So we've had some locations and, the market, we get outbid at times and things happen, but we have an opportunity coming up that we're looking at, and we're just trusting that at some point it will be able to make that happen. That's been a passion of mine for a long time. And so my joke with the board is when we accomplish that goal, you can find a new leader. I'm going warmer waters and some more sunshine, more than 6 weeks a year.
So to have a residence is one of your future goals.
It is. It has been for a while, yes.
Within the city?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
In the region.
In the region.
Yes.
Well, Julie, I applaud you, and also your sense of humor, because you I believe in any these are serious and very grave circumstances that folks are facing, but it's almost like folks in the medical profession. You find some very humorous folks there, and I wanted to touch on to kind of end on a positive note. Music therapy. That you studied at Fredonia State, music therapy. Have you incorporated music into Path? How have you applied that knowledge base into your life, to your work?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
And arts and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you asking. It's interesting. Most people focus on the masters, from UB and the counseling. But I appreciate the thought of that. And so interestingly, I am a musician. And so that was part of my DNA as a child. That honestly was my escape a little bit. We have our own stories, and I have mine, and music was kind of my coping mechanism. And so kind of self-taught pianist, did violin in high school, and just started feeling like, oh, maybe I want to go to school for music, and got some lessons and got in as a music major, and always kind of had that counseling piece inside of me. And when I heard there was a way to combine that in music therapy, I thought, wow, this is fantastic. So, was able to work in that field a bit while getting my master's. And even when I started doing clinical behavioral health, still continued some of the music therapy work. And so not only is it just a personal form of expression and that I find a good coping mechanism, but I also saw how incredibly fruitful it was in the mental health arena. And I also worked with hospice. And I would constantly be so amazed by how even physiologically, people hooked up to monitors and heart rate slowing down and calming and soothing that happened, and the relaxation side and the reduction of anxiety. And then there's been a lot of research on the healing, the physiological healing, a lot of research on how it's the only mechanism that uses both hemispheres of the brain. And so how there's healing with that. And then in the trauma healing space. And so, of course, in my role, I wish I had time to do music therapy, but I do not. So I do have a music therapist that does come in and do that, and love her. She's amazing. Definitely far more of a music therapist than I could be at this stage. We also have an art therapist. And that was one of the things when developing our enrichment center was wanting a holistic healing component. So we address people physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So we do have our social workers that do intensive case management and coping and crisis, but I also wanted alongside those individual support sessions to have those healing arts. And so they can come to groups and do the art therapy, the music therapy, fitness empowerment. We have a DBT, which is a trauma therapy group. We hand out 90 to 100 meals a week to provide that basic need. We give out clothing. Sometimes we'll get calls, they have nothing but the clothes on their back, hygiene items. We offer transportation services, the medical care. So really trying to look at all those areas
one-stop shop
where
for
people
the
need those areas to be met. So, I'm a firm believer in the whole creative arts therapy side and what that does, and watching people express their trauma through it is really a beautiful thing. We had a teen show me her painting she made, and one side was all black and like a storm, and the other side was blue, and there was a bridge combining them. And I said, so is this dark side kind of your life experiences and the blue side where you're going? And she said, yeah. And so one staff goes, where are you on that bridge? And I thought, that's a beautiful question. And she pointed to being almost at the point of the blue. And I thought, how beautiful is that? And then we've had clients write whole songs expressing their trauma, or raps, and, because they're, into rap music. And I thought, how beautiful is that? I had one we met a week or two ago who made a comment that said, thank you for not making me tell my story the first time meeting me. Sometimes people just want to be,
right,
and they just want to express themselves, and they don't want to have to tell you. Right. So I think those are key things to part of the whole healing component.
That's excellent.
Julie, you've been featured in Inspiring Women of Western New York. What does that mean to you personally?
I mean, what an honor, because I look at the women in that book and I think, wow, I haven't done even a quarter of what they've accomplished, and, really thankful. Scott Beeler in West Her sponsored that, and his support has
Great supporter,
he's such a wonderful man, generous man in our community. And it's been so meaningful to have somebody like that supports your work. And so really, what an honor. I still look and think, I don't know how I somehow got in the category with these amazing women doing huge things, but feel real blessed to be thought of in that group.
Well, you're definitely humble. And I mean, I like to always express our guests and detail their accolades and where they come from and what they've achieved. And you certainly achieved a lot and are achieving a lot with Path. I like I said earlier, I applaud you on your mission. Keep fighting on. You're always a welcome guest on Sin Fronteras to share any new information or keep educating us.
I would love to be back anytime.
About the things that we're not talking enough about. But Julie, thank you so much for being on with us on Sin Fronteras Western New York. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. I genuinely appreciate your support and raising more awareness in the community.
And thank you very much for being our guest, Julie.
Absolutely. Anytime.
A very special thanks to Julie Palmer for joining us on Sin Fronteras Western New York and shedding light to the very important work that PATH is doing in our Western New York community. Thank you so much, Julie. And now we move on to sort of a new segment. I mentioned an event on last week's program, and this week I thought we would just highlight yet another cultural event going on in our backyard. This Saturday, September 14th, the Niagara Arts and Cultural Center is holding a reception for its annual art exhibit. Los Artistas del Barrio Buffalo presents Beyond Borders, an annual showcase of Spanish culture, heritage, and history. Beyond Borders runs from now up until October 5th. And this year's featured works are all about fire, water, air, and earth, the elements. We're hoping to have some of those folks connected to this project soon on our program. But in the meantime, the reception takes place again this Saturday, September 14th, from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. And that, once again, is at the Niagara Arts and Cultural Center. And moving on, it wouldn't be a Sin Fronteras Western New York episode, proper one, without a bochinche story or two. I haven't been very shy about my personal past, where I come from, who I am. But big news out of my beloved alma mater, Florida International University. That's right. They have signed a new stadium naming rights deal. Now, why is that important? Well, because the name of the stadium is now Pitbull Stadium. That's right. Armando Cristian Perez, or as he is most commonly known as, Pitbull, is the first musician, and Latino musician at that, to have naming rights to a sporting venue. Shout out to my hermano cubano from another madre, because while the thought of attending a football game that has Dale FIUs painted in the end zone is rather surreal and, I'm not going to lie, quite comical to me. In all seriousness, the guy is an inspiration and truly kind of an embodiment of the American dream. He's more than just catchy hooks and verses. He's given back to the communities that nationwide. You just go ahead and look up the many SLAM charter schools, and SLAM stands for Sports Leadership, Arts, and Management. He's opened over 24 of these schools in places such as Florida, Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona. Mr. Worldwide is making the world around him a better place, and I'm honored that he's chosen to partner with my school, the school that gave me my education and helped make me. So I had to say that as a proud Golden Panther. I thought that was a fun story out there in the news. But I also would be remiss if I didn't mention this one, my second bochincha story for the week. I'm a certified news junkie, guilty as charged. And I respect the craft, admire the work that goes into putting together a proper newscast and reporting the news professionally. I don't consider myself anywhere near their levels, but there's a handful of journalists that have inspired me and made me fall in love with news production. People like Walter Cronkite, Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, Barbara Walters, Christiane Amarpour, Linda Ellerby. Yes, Nick News' own. And in the Spanish world of Spanish news, I'm going hyper-local again, but Guillermo Benitez, a longtime Univision 23 anchor, and related on a national level, Noticiero Univision's own Jorge Ramos. The latter just recently this week announced that he would be ending his 38-year run at Televisa Univision. I've been on this earth for almost as much as that time, if not longer. And as long as I can remember, Jorge Ramos has been synonymous with Spanish news. The polish, the professionalism, the ease at which he presented and reported the news, his interviewing skills, his unabashed and dogged journalistic integrity. He's made some headlines himself, unfortunately, getting deported basically from Venezuela after a very tense interview with the always newsworthy Nicolás Maduro. He's had his run-ins with presidential candidate and former president Donald Trump, but the man he just makes it seem so effortless, and it's just impressive seeing him over a 38-year career. He and his co-anchor, Maria Elena Salinas, sit atop the Spanish news mountaintop for me, and many others, I feel like. He hasn't disclosed whether or not he'll continue his career elsewhere, but as I mentioned, he's been with the cable network now for as long as I've known it, and it feels like the end of an era. It's the same feelings I had when Don Francisco, another titan in Spanish broadcasting, called it quits on Sábado Gigante. I hope I don't have to explain what that is, because that's just a cultural behemoth. But again, I digress. I doubt he's listening, but I just wanted to say muchísimas gracias al Señor Ramos for being a trailblazer and an inspiration to me and many, many others like me. So thank you so much. And we're running out of show, but I want to quickly remind everybody that our past episodes are on demand wherever you get your podcasts. Sin Fronteras Western New York is now on Spotify, on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, a number of other platforms. Also, our latest episodes will now be rebroadcast on Sundays at 8 p.m. and then again at 1 p.m. on the Friday of the following week. All of that on Radio Bilingüe 88.7 HC3. Remember, if you want to reach out to our program, if you like what you hear, if you don't like what you hear, if you want to be a guest, if you want to contribute a story or a piece that you have yourself put together, we are open to submissions. You could do so, and you can reach us at Sin Fronteras Western New York at gmail.com. That is our email address. We do check it. Who says that the news media is inaccessible? Not I. But as we near the end of our show, I've been trying to figure out a signature sign-off. And like I mentioned, all those past great anchors, they all had their great sign-offs. And talking about Jorge Ramos and old school Univision, I was reminded of the sign-off from another legendary show in my book, at least, on that network. The comedy show, Bienvenidos. So as we say the opposite of Bienvenidos, and we say adios, I'd like to end this episode with a nod to that program and its host, Miguel Ángel Landa. So, amigos y amigas, this has been Sin Fronteras Western New York. Mi nombre es Lorenzo Rodríguez. Hagan bien y no miren a quién. Hasta la próxima.